Hyper, UDAS, Bitcoin, reserve, shocker. It's being demanded now. It's no joke to print that much US dollars. How the market can handle buying as much Bitcoin as possible with that. Bitcoin gains purchasing power over time. And suddenly the government is debt-free. Massive demands here. Because those are the highly explosive statements from Matt Odell, who is really in the game. He has a name in the Bitcoin space and is really well known for his, let's say, solid arguments and his cool insights. Maybe we also need to correct that it's not a demand, but more of a call to action. To save the US from a big mess. He's saying here that the US should go all in on Bitcoin. So it shouldn't be like, just 100,000. Go all in on Bitcoin. So it shouldn't be like, just 100,000 by Bitcoin, but here 650,000. By Bitcoin, 1 million, 2, 3 for 5 million Bitcoin. Okay, 5 million might be a bit much, but basically everything that's possible. That means you should really put your own currency at risk. It's about putting it all on the line. Of course, you have to be careful at the same time that the whole thing doesn't hyperinflate. And at the same time, a massive amount of Bitcoin should be bought with all that newly printed money. I mean, the US could easily buy 1 million Bitcoin. When they start here, printing money, we're taking a look at these demands here from Matt Odell because these are highly explosive, as they also confirm the theory of many, many people that the US, if they implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy, either have to do it right or not at all. So they either go all in or they do it right. Because if you only do it half-heartedly, if you just, let's say, convert the 200,000 confiscated Bitcoin into a strategic Bitcoin reserve, then you've got a problem. Convert confiscated Bitcoin into a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Then you've got the problem here, that other nations will massively get ahead of the U.S. And the US will then buy Bitcoin more slowly than other nations. Other nations might, who knows, per year 300,000, 400,000 buy Bitcoin, and the US will just have their 200,000 Bitcoin or buys here, who knows, 50,000 Bitcoin or something like that each year. That could definitely be too little. Robert Kennedy Jr., he also called for buying 4 million Bitcoin. But in the end, it's about the US getting out of debt. I'm still very, very skeptical here. The whole concept can work out, as I said, on the condition that you pump it into Bitcoin in an ultra-bullish and ultra-hyper-aggressive way. That you really pump the Valhalla candles up and drive Bitcoin massively higher. Then it can really work out. But it's really a very, very risky game here. Because first of all, you're putting the dollar on the line. Secondly, trust in the dollar could also be lost. Because what kind of sign is that? If you're basically massively inflating your own money here, just to pump the Bitcoin price up. But there are indications that even confirm this. And we're also going to take a closer look at Matt Odell's statement. But there are now indications. A sworn employee has now also revealed that Donald Trump apparently has a very, very big interest in pumping up the Bitcoin price. He actually has insider information that we'll also take a look at. And that would also make sense. Because if the US creates a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and here Matt Odell's scenario plays out, and they're driving this very, very aggressively, then of course, the Bitcoin price has to be pumped up massively here too. Because only if the US buys massively into Bitcoin and pumps the Bitcoin price up significantly. Then, at some point, maybe after 10 or 15 years, you might be able to get out of debt, or maybe it'll take even longer. There are also some projections from Michael Saylor who said, okay, if you buy this much Bitcoin, then you'll be debt-free by 2040. If you buy this much Bitcoin, then you'll be debt-free by 2045. So this isn't really a new theory here. It's basically a common one. Common theory. Michael Saylor has now also met with Eric Trump. So it's quite possible that these theories are being discussed here with Donald Trump. He has already said, hey, we can pay off our debts with Bitcoin. Or at least he threw out a question like that. A sort of rhetorical question or something, right? Rhetorical question, just throwing an open question out there. And now check out what Matt Odell has to say. His clip is really explosive.
Literally, if you look at the current state of the US government and our debt burden, the only way for us to express ourselves is to acquire money and buy Bitcoin. The only way to express ourselves is to acquire money and buy Bitcoin. We have a unique opportunity here. We are the only country in the world where our debt is denominated in our own shitcoin, and we have the opportunity to acquire this shitcoin. And the hardest asset that has ever existed is to buy. I used to talk about it. I thought it would never be possible. It will never happen, and we're seeing the first signs of it. There's a delicate act here, because you don't want to let the currency go into free fall. That's where you end up in a real mess. And even without the Bitcoin scene, we're already on the edge. We've already started controlling the 10-year treasuries. People have started to understand why I'm putting the US treasuries for 10 years at a high interest rate. And the self-confidence is already torn. When you hit more self-confidence, it can really go south, really fast. So there's a delicate balancing act where you start to see things like in the Lummis bill. We're selling our gold, which isn't marketless, for Bitcoin on the market. We're not going to print money to buy Bitcoin, so he's saying, here, Bitcoin is possible. The Bitcoin appreciation tool is clearly over time, and all of a sudden our government is solvent instead of being in the red. Who wouldn't want a solvent government? That or other possibilities where that could be possible.
Can't imagine any other possibility. How the US is doing here. In short, he also confirms here that the US is the only nation here that has such an opportunity here. Other nations don't have this opportunity in the same way, because the US has the largest currency area and can exercise the money printing privilege the most. Sure, the EU or something like that could do this too, but not in such an aggressive way as the U.S. And then, in the end, it's really just a balancing act. And he's also talking about the dangers. One, because you definitely shouldn't underestimate that, because he says there's already a loss of trust. No one wants U.S. Treasury bonds anymore. The U.S., I would say, isn't quite in free fall yet, but the first signs of free fall are already visible, he says here. And now you really have to be careful that if you make such an aggressive move here, that you don't send all these US dollars into a complete free fall, because that could definitely happen. That means you have the chance to get out of debt. Or you have the chance to completely drive the US dollar into ruin. And that's the big trade-off here, whether you want to take that risk or can take that risk. On the other hand, you could also argue that it already looks very, very bad. So the US dollar probably won't survive the next 20 years. And then you could also say, okay, if you're already, let's say, in a decline, the more you're falling, the higher you have to gamble sometimes. Let's just call it the Bitcoin story. I'd say a very, very smart move to rein it all in. By the way, this whole thing was a clip from Bitcoin Did, and just so you don't wonder about it. This isn't an old clip from Peter McCormick, who used to do what Bitcoin did. But now Danny Knowles has taken over here, and he's also the one to credit for this source. So this is here, I don't know if it's super current. The clip is probably just a few weeks old. Or maybe just a few days. I haven't watched all the episodes. But in any case, Danny Knowles is being referenced. And he has now taken over the What Bitcoin Did show from Peter McCormick. What really stands out here is that it's mentioned he used to make jokes about the whole thing. The strategic Bitcoin reserve, and I didn't take that seriously either, then it says very little. No joking around, he wants to pay off the debt. And I still can't take it 100% seriously, but that's exactly what he's saying. These days, people aren't laughing about it as much anymore. The likelihood of it happening is getting higher again. So, it's not being said here that it's going to happen 100%. The only thing that's basically being implemented or implied here. I mix up implemented and implied sometimes. Someone wrote to me about this earlier. The only thing that's basically being implied here is that the likelihood keeps increasing. That the US does something like this even with a weaker dollar. The time window to do that. But that's also running out. So you can't do that in 5 years. But if you do it, you probably have to do it in 2025. And I probably don't need to tell you that this action here is going to trigger the ultimate Godzilla pump. Bags from all Bitcoin holders are getting pumped up massively here. Now we actually have an interesting assessment from a sworn employee who also talks about this. Why Donald Trump wants to pump the Bitcoin price up so massively. And here he really wants to trigger the Godzilla and Valhalla candle at the same time.
And I've heard how some kind of warnings, right? That Trump said, he said that he sees an increased Bitcoin price as a significant barometer of his success. Like he wants to see that number going up in the same way he loves seeing the stock market go up. I've heard him say that he wants to see it. He wants to see it go over 150 within the first few months, and he wants to see that price keep rising. And, you know, Eric Trump in the Middle East, I mean, he tossed out $1 million Bitcoin I mean, there are prices that have been thrown out, and I just keep my ears to the ground reading the tea leaves. I'm just much more on the side that, like, for every foundation, these guys are in. They're kind of in.
And here it's clearly confirmed that he apparently has insider information here. So, folks, people who were in direct contact with Donald Trump. And it seems to have come out that Donald Trump definitely wants to pump the Bitcoin price up. And in the first few months, he definitely wants to see at least 150,000. He wants to see the US dollar, because he also sees the Bitcoin price as part of his success. And it's crazy that Donald Trump has the same incentives. Like Bitcoin holders. Bitcoin holders want to see the price go up. Okay, some might say they want to see the price go down because they understand that gives them buying opportunities. But in the long run, you definitely want to see the Bitcoin price go up. It doesn't make any sense if Bitcoin keeps falling. And now Donald Trump basically has the same incentives. Like a lot of people hear from the Bitcoin community that the Bitcoin price is being pumped up. And he says the same thing about the stock market. Donald Trump also has, let's say, a success indicator. And the success indicator means rising stock markets. Because then people are happy and they want to vote for him again. Then maybe companies will do well and stuff. And now he seems to have not only the rising stock market as a success indicator, but also the rising Bitcoin price. And 150 in the first few months is already pretty good. But this will be addressed further here, that Eric Trump, he's talking about $1 million Bitcoin price. So the 150 is actually set a bit conservatively here. Eric Trump is actually way more bullish here. He's aiming for $1 million here in the end. And the important thing that's being mentioned here again, that all the Bitcoin folks here from the Trump administration are now in the game. That means Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, the Treasury Secretary, the SEC Chief, then we have Howard Lutnick and so on. We don't need to go through the whole list now, but they're all basically in the game here. And they all have, not just like Donald Trump, the incentive to pump the Bitcoin price. And that's ultra crazy because people are just driven by incentives. If there's just the incentive to pump Bitcoin, because we're all just involved, then the Bitcoin price gets pumped. If there's an incentive to dump Bitcoin because no one is invested in it, and if you only look at the dollar, then there's also the incentive to dump Bitcoin here. And if there's even the incentive to pump Bitcoin now, to pump the dollar. So to make the dollar stronger, then it's obviously the ultimate for Bitcoin, because with Bitcoin, you can hit multiple targets at once. On one hand, it strengthens the US dollar, and on the other hand, the investors are happy and so on. And that's a really, really crazy development, I'd say, because early on, people always thought, okay, hey, there's this big war between Bitcoin and the dollar, between Bitcoin and the euro. And what do I know, right? And yeah, Europe isn't going to get it, but the USA gets it, and if the USA gets it, it doesn't really matter what Europe is doing, because then the Bitcoin price will really escalate upwards. It's almost hard to imagine. If you've got FOMO now, and now you want to take advantage of the opportunity window before the big nations trigger those Godzilla candles. Then check out 21 Bitcoin. I'll put a link down below for you. You can easily buy Bitcoin there. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Absolutely recommend it. And check this out. In the background, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to grab some papayas here. Check this out. How fat these are. One of them is already nibbled by the birds. That's why I got to step on the gas now. That the fat papaya, especially this one, you can't see it. Yeah, hold on a second. This one here, the left one, I'm going to grab it now. Probably needs, I don't know, another 2 or 3 days until it's ripe. But yeah, I'm doing that now. So peace out.